My wife Trace and I and our two daughters, Raleigh and Ray. Raleigh is Old English for dweller by the deer meadow, and Ray, R-A-E, is Hebrew for doe. I share that only to let you know that everything in my life is impacted by deer. My daughters' names to everything I do. A slide of our place there at Branson, Missouri. How many people been to Branson? About everybody. Yeah, we love it. We serve about 11 million tourists a year. We love it because our property tax is real low, so keep bringing those tourist dollars. It's just, we love it. My place, and we don't have too many rocks on top. You see, you go down about 2.5, 3 feet, it's solid rocks. We think that first 2 feet's pretty good at my place. And what I've learned is that's just my fertilizer. It is. I just need right plants and microbes and fungi to convert that into fertilizer. I have not, except for testing or little high-yield food plot or something, I have not paid for any fertilizer, any insecticide, anything like that in 8 years. Zero. I can take that money and go fishing or add more food plots or something like that. Don't tell Tracy I said that. So that's it really. And we started like this. Tracy and I bought this old burnt-out cattle ranch. I'll just tell you real quickly. We're living in South Carolina. I schooled at Georgia and Clemson and taught all that chemistry about soil science, and I was taught in school. Literally, I remember the quote, and I think most of the guys here have heard it. It takes 1,000 years to build an inch of soil. And I think that's true. If you set this rock out in the parking lot and we could come back 1,000 years, it might weather enough to, be about an inch of dirt laying around the edge of that rock or something. I think we can grow, a quarter inch or more of dirt a year, literally. I'd like to go back to those professors and say, come on over to Branson, let me show you what, you should have known. But this was a view when we first bought it, and it's like a lot of places in the Ozarks or Kansas or Oklahoma, cedars are taking over. Oklahoma publishes they lose an average about 700 acres a day to cedars. Now, that's one here, one there, but statewide, if we could jump all together and driving over here through Kansas, there's cedars everywhere. And Sericea lespedeza, that's the brown stuff out there, and high-graded oak hardwoods. And you can see some rock over here. We're putting in a septic system, it's just all rock. It's pretty gnarly. And now we grow some really nice deer and, raise kids and have fun. And so there's just a soil line, you see that white line. That's what it looks like on top. That's what it looks like on top. That's after I've no-tilled soybeans about 20 years ago when I started. I literally drill right through rock. I've covered that with about 6 inches of dirt now. That's where I started. And there's this guy, if you're taking notes, write this down. This is Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold was the first guy in America to have the title wildlife biologist. And he wrote a bunch. He's really prolific. But he wrote a book called A Sand County Almanac. And he saved up some money. Wildlife biologists never paid well. And he bought this sand farm. It's in Wisconsin. It had been highly eroded. It's just down to sand and hardly any trees. And he spent his weekends away from the university planting trees and doing things. And he made observations every month, so that's the almanac. And he would just spend a lot of time outside. And Keith and I and Patrick would tell you, get outside in your fields, take a spade, take a shovel, or in my case, flip some rocks and see what's underneath there. So I started like this literally. Literally started there. This is not just like one picture. This was my ranch. And I did not know Keith, and I didn't know Steve. I knew the Noble Foundation. I didn't know Patrick. I learned a lot of stuff on my own, and I think this is great because people around the world are learning things by practicing and trial and error, and then they meet someone and say, oh yeah, I tried this, I tried that, and we're getting similar results using these principles, not necessarily the same techniques, but principles, and finding similar results. And there's just this groundswell. This was a guy that went through my part of the country, Beaver Creek, James River, where I live in southern Missouri, and he kept a journal. He was looking for lead. This is, pre-settlement explorers. He was looking for lead or lead mines. That was real important in the day. Lead was real important. And he talks about how open the hardwoods were. Y'all all been to Branson. He never mentions a cedar tree. In his whole journal, he never mentions a cedar tree. And he talks about how easy it was to ride a horse through all the timber. Never knocked the hat off his head. That's actually one of the lines. And now you drive down to Branson, it's a tree that's about 4 inches round and all crooked every 2 feet. You can barely walk through there. We're not looking at what Daniel Boone saw, and we can know that. We don't have to go to college. We can read these books. And here in Kansas, this is an awesome book. If you live in Kansas, get your phone out and take a picture of this. You need to read. If you're a hunter, I'm going to introduce you to one of the greatest hunters that was ever in Kansas, this guy right here. He's one of the first white buffalo hunters. He was a farm boy in Iowa. And come over here, this is actually the guy that laid out the streets, obviously not all the streets that are there now, in Wichita. He started that town after all the buffalo were gone. This guy was brilliant. He was the Elon Musk of his day. In his observations of the plants and the buffalo and how they interacted, he was just out there killing buffalo for hides and tongue. But his observations of what was going on is exactly what we do with soil health. And this is my place after a lot of years of work. This whole area you're looking at, all these wildflowers, was covered with cedars. But it goes to what Keith was talking about. Look at the diversity, just different flower colors, let alone if you don't recognize all the native grasses. None of this was planted. It's in the seed bank, it's in the soil. And we felled all the cedars, used a lot of fire. I like fire a lot. If I don't get 2 or 3 fire departments showing up, it's not a good day, literally. Fire is such a natural, free tool. It can be overused and abused, but it's a great tool. So this is that diversity. And something's growing all the time. And there's gads and gads of insects out there, and the bird life. Me and the Missouri Department of Conservation were out there listening to birds last summer sometime, and I don't remember the number, I'm probably wrong, but I think it was 60 some odd songbirds in a 10-minute period of time we identified just standing there. That's really good diversity. The soil is covered in vegetation year-round. It's not bare. Driving from Branson over to here, all those bare fields, Aldo Leopold made this statement. He published this. The more you know, he's talking in conservation, ecology terms, the more you know, the sadder you will become when you drive across America. I look at it different. The more I know, the more excited I am about how much we can do and make this country and the planet so great. It can be so great. We can revitalize small farming communities in Missouri and Kansas. We can put income in there. We can make you where you can kill big deer and make a living off 400 acres. You don't have to have 14,000 acres and $18 million of combines. You don't. Forage crews many days out of the year. There's a wide diversity of species, plant roots, and critters tilled the soil. There was no disc. When Mr. Meade was going through Kansas talking about how beautiful the soil was, he took time to look, even though he's trying to kill buffalo and make a living. There was no disc out there. And it was so productive. There were estimated 60 million bison. Bison are big, about twice the size of the average cow. 60 million bison, no one was feeding hay. Right now there's 60 million cattle in the plain states by USDA estimates, and they're feeding like crazy. They're worming, vaccinating, doing everything. They're standing in poop 2 feet deep in a feedlot out here in western Kansas, and there were 60 million bison, and no one's doing anything except shooting at them. And ruminants impacted soil. Ruminants, something chooses could, will impact soil, and I'm going to show you how they do that in one of these slides here. And we went to this, all right? We got to be smart. And we disc, and you can see a little wind erosion right there in the Ozarks. That's when you see that. I mean, people laugh about it all the time. I had a guy in Oklahoma, I'm going to go help him. He's a big farmer, working him on soil health, southwestern Oklahoma, Blair, Oklahoma. And he sent me his thing. Yeah, look behind me. He's turned his cell phone around and he's planting wheat. He's just no-tilling. Like no-tilling should be like no disturbance. And I tell, man, that's great, because I think you've got a southwest wind today. That's blowing towards Missouri. We're getting some topsoil today. That's awesome, man. Keep doing that. Ray Archuleta, a mutual friend of some of us in here. Ray's a brilliant guy. He's an evangelist, man. You think I'm animated. This guy is an evangelist about soil. And he had a slide years ago talked about this picture being naked, dead, cold, hot, and compacted. Earthworms are huge for soil health. This is just killing them like crazy. I can't think of a better tool except anhydrous to kill earthworms. Did you know earthworms weren't native to this continent, by the way? God used to have dung beetles here. Dung beetles are so cool. They're going, species of dung beetles and subspecies of dung beetles are going extinct because we keep feeding cattle ivermectin. You go out in pasture now, pick up a cow patty, you can throw it like a frisbee because it's oxidized. When I was a kid on the farm, we scouted turkeys by cow pies because they would scratch in them to get, the grain the cow didn't totally digest in there. That's how we scout. Oh man, that cow pie's fresh, it's still steaming. And turkey been scratching in there, sat down, start calling. Now you don't ever see turkey scratching cow pies, almost never, because there's no maggots under the cow pie because there's so many chemicals in the cow and you're eating that. Make no mistake about it, you are eating it. It's not all going out the cow. You are eating it. Make no mistake about that. So dead, naked, hot, it's going to get hot, it's going to get cold, it's going to blow away. This, the physics of it, you got a heavy object going forward, it's pulling another heavy object, but there's this thing called gravity. So some of that weight is going down, and the tractor is transferring some of the weight to the disc. That's what happens with that forward motion. And so you got things, let's just call them an 1/8 inch thick, pressing down with additional weight because of the motion of the tractor. So real fluffy, about 6 inches below that, you're creating a hard pan. Worms and dung beetles can't go up and down. Dung beetles, they went down about 14 inches deep. They took fertilizer, dung, 14 inches deep to feed their babies in their little nest, put fertilizer right down in the perfect root depth. Now we got all kind of chisel plows and this and that and the other, and we're sucking in anhydrous and doing stuff. God had this plan, right? Just dung beetles. Just need some dung beetles. Put some cows on the ground every now and then. When we look at natural systems, always covered, it's alive, it's not too hot, not too cold, it's aerated. Those roots and insects are just opening up that soil. I don't own a disc. So let's go through these. Soil was covered with vegetation year round. How you do that? Well, you plant green like Keith kind of talked about. Here it is right here. Watch each wheel. See it going up and down? That's hitting rocks in the Ozarks, literally. That's just bouncing over rocks. My dad told me windows were the worst thing he ever put on a tractor. I decided it's too tight to buy me a tractor with windows on there because you can hear, and if your equipment starts making a bad noise, you need to stop and fix it before it breaks, and it's really expensive. Now I got the radio on. I unplugged my radio so my employees can't listen to it while they're driving the tractor. And this is sped up because our land's so rocky, we plant at about 1.5 miles an hour, literally. Not because I'm going to tear up the drill, because it'd throw you out of the tractor. That's planting green, called planting green. I didn't disturb soil, right? And as a deer guy, that stuff I ran over is still growing a little bit. My deer is still feeding there every day. Because when you disc, what have you done? You just cleaned the table. You've said to your deer, I don't like you, I don't love you, and I want you to go eat at Darren's place. Because there's no food here. That's what you're doing. You're cleaning the table. And in smaller food plots, we do a lot of seeding like this. Now, you got to seed at a real heavy rate. Don't think like 1.2 times, 3, 4 times what the bag says. And you need to do this, see how it's cloudy in the background? Right before rain. You got to have some way to get seed in contact with soil because it's going to get warm and wet, tied up in that vegetation and germinate, but the root's not getting in the soil. So it's going to starve to death at some point. Got to get to the soil. And then my crimper, not my crimper, a crimper. This is my buffalo. This is my bison. If I could figure out how to make this thing urinate, defecate, and salivate while I was rolling across the field, it would be awesome, man. Some little spigots coming out on each side. It'd be awesome. But I'm terminating that vegetation by breaking the stem about every 8 inches and leaving a big mulch mat on the ground. Now, pigweed, ragweed, a lot of these plants will make 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 seeds per plant. They're real small. Like, no one ever said, boy, look at these ragweed seeds. They're real small. They just blow away. So you got that small seed, and all it's got to grow with until it gets leaves and photosynthesizes is the onboard energy, what it's got in the seed. So you put 4 or 5 inches of heavy green wet mulch on top of it, it gets warm and wet and germinates, but before it can get through all that, make a leaf or two and photosynthesize, it starves to death and dies. Now you take even something bigger, a clover seed, a turnip seed, cereal rye, soybean, corn, peas, whatever, it's got a lot more onboard energy, kind of like I got some onboard energy. It's got a lot more onboard energy. And it gets warm and wet, and in the soil, it's got enough energy to poke up through there and make some leaves, and it's like mulching your garden. Mulch around your wife's flower bed. But I just mulch by driving my crimper over there. Crimping only works. I get this email all the time. Oh, I crimped and stood back up. I have too. You wait until the bulk of the plants, in my case in this food plot, be cereal rye, stand up tall, and the seed heads are in the dough stage. The seed head's kind of fully formed, and you kind of peel it down and squeeze it, and it pops, not to be crude, but I like to be illustrative, almost like a pimple. It's got moisture, it's in the dough stage. If you crimp too late and it's already hard, then you just planted. You didn't crimp, you planted, because you put all these mature, viable seeds on the ground, and some percentage of them is going to germinate. If you crimp too early, it hadn't made that seed in the dough stage, the dough stage really weakens the plant. So a lot of stress by crimping will terminate the plant. If you crimp too early, some percentage of it's going to stand back up. Now you got a mess. You got new growth competing with old growth, and you got stuff growing out of season, and that plant will make viable seed. And you're going, well, that's free seed. I hear some volunteer seed, man, I have to pay the seed guy, I got some free seed. Well, if every acorn germinated under a tree, what would happen? A, you couldn't see any deer in there, and B, it would probably kill the big tree because there's so much competition. One wheat seed could make, 30, 40, 100 kernels. So where you planted one, now you got 50 of them competing. It doesn't work. Volunteer seeds never at the right density. It's too thick on this side field, too thin over here, weeds growing everywhere. Most weed seeds are real small. So this is my mulch, my future fertilizer, and my herbicide all in one pass. All in one pass. And it works. I'm not anti-herbicide. I look at herbicide like a root canal. If I got a root canal, I don't have one. I want to get taken care of so it doesn't rot out the rest of my teeth. I don't want a root canal, but if I need one, I understand the purpose of it and I'll get one. I don't like herbicide, but if I had a really dry year maybe, and my crops didn't grow well and some weeds got going, I'll make a herbicide pass so I don't make a bunch of seeds and I'm fighting them again. You don't have a crimper tractor? Do this. This is the best elk training I've ever done in my life. You run one of these while you're ready to go up a mountain. 2x6, couple pieces of angle iron on the bottom, rope that you can tie at different lengths so you can get the right height for you. You don't want to be way down here, it hurts your back, or way up here, your arms get really tired. And you notice when you're doing it, you don't just step on it, you kind of put some weight on there. Those angle irons got to crimp the stem to do any good. Otherwise, it's like driving through your yard. And 2 days later, you can't see the tire tracks. It just grows right back up, right? That's another illustration why you have to have those plants in the dough stage. Because just like driving through your yard, it'll just stand back up. Foot crimper, awesome tool for little hidey-hole food plots. We'll talk more about later. Now, some people drill too early. This was you see people all around, they got coats on. This was a demonstration we were doing. So this is not real timing, because if you planted a new crop in that low crop like we just saw, it'd be outcompeted by the more mature plants. I have drilled right through soybeans. And if you do it before they're setting a very high percentage of flowers, a good percent will stand back up. And what I found is about 50%, so you get enough sunshine down to start your new crop growing and plenty of feed so they don't go to Darren's place. If you want to kill the beans, wait till there's about 60 or 70% flowers and none of them will stand back up. Beans are a weak crop. You'll just terminate them. But beans, of course, are real high in nitrogen. You talk about putting some nitrogen in soil quickly. Man, you plant a fall blend after this, it's blowing out of the ground if there's any moisture at all. This is so important, and I hope you can read it. But down here in the green, it says 100% of the moisture is used for plant growth. Because you get much more high temperature than that, up there, 87, 88 degrees, whatever it is, it's going to start evaporating, and the plants are going to start shutting down just a little bit. And then we go up here in the yellow, only 15% of the moisture is available for the plant. Now, 17%, 14%, this is going to vary a little bit by conditions, but this is the general trend. Then you get up there above 113 degrees, and people, a lot of odds, go, son, the soil ain't never been 113 degrees. I got a little infrared temperature-taking gun. I call it my thermometer pistol in my hand, and I'm right on top. Obviously, this cover crop had a lot of cereal rye in it. Cover crop, guys, I'm telling you as hunters, we got it so made, as Keith said. We can just plant stuff and don't have to have a combine, let deer eat what they want, and use the rest for our weed control and fertilizer. And we can plant blends because we're not combining. The deer are our combine. Like my combine, everybody says they got a John Deere combine. I got a 10-point combine. What brand is that, son? What's right out there? I like them 12-point combines. I like them non-typical combines. Got the handlebar on the side. On top of the soil here is 103 degrees on top of the cover crop. 103 degrees. It was about 82 degrees that day. You ever put your hand on a black pickup truck, maybe a fall hunting day, you come back in from hunting, got a little chilly that morning, man, you just kind of resting, put your bow up there, lean on it. Oh, it's hot. Because that black or dark truck is taking that solar energy, just like dirt, right? So 103 degrees on top, 87 degrees when I pull it back real quickly because the sun heated up quick. I mean, I've learned this through time. You can't pull it back and be telling a story and then get the video camera ready and start filming because it'll heat up on you. You like, pull it back and go. 87 degrees. Right there in the ideal growing place. Keith said this so beautifully, it's not how much rain you get, it's how much you keep. And this is one of the best ways to keep rain and infiltration. You got to cover the soil. But where I turned the tractor too sharp or, I didn't plant straight or whatever happened and my soil was bare, there's a soybean seed and you just look at it like, that don't look too good. And the soil it doesn't look like soil, it looks like dirt. 131 degrees on an 80-degree morning. I've measured 135, 140. And when a plant is really small, young, you're planting the traditional 15-inch rows and you've been disking, so it's, it looks like a perfect farm. Man, that field look how straight my rows are. I'm like, that's so awesome because deer can walk right down the road and eat every bean, not have to trip on anything. That's awesome, man. I like mine all crowded in there and I don't want any weeds growing. And I don't want sun hitting my ground. That's about 5 inches deep of mulch on there. So there's a place where the plants didn't grow. I probably skipped. Maybe there's a rock, bounced the drill over something. And there's some sun hitting the ground right there, but it's not hitting the ground. It's tied up on my mulch, right? And my earthworms right below there are happy as they can be because it's moist and they're covered. And decaying plant material is earthworm food. Like newspapers, decayed plant material basically. If you raise fishing worms in your basement, you feed them newspaper. I'm just letting cereal rye from 2 years ago that's weathered. And as this stuff weathers, that cereal rye, Patrick's measured it at our place, has a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen stuff you might go store and buy in there. You think about this, it's really dry. If you got a bale of hay and you sit out here and it never rains in this building and we can keep insects on it, it's just a bale of hay, right? Come back a little later, it's just a bale of hay. You got outside, starts breaking down the UV and insects and stuff, and it's breaking down those nutrients go in soil, but it breaks down much quicker if you water it every day, right? It rots or decomposes much quicker. So that duff is holding nutrients. It's the perfect slow-release fertilizer. And then it rains, it breaks down a little quicker where those nutrients go in the soil right when the plant really wants to grow. When the plant's going, man, I'm moist and warm, I want to grow, there's a nutrient release. It's like trickle fertilizer in the greenhouse, except you don't have to do anything. I have to get up and go, well, I got to go turn that fertilizer on, honey. I can just sleep right through the rainstorm, go, my plant's getting some food today. So, forage crews many days out of the year. Keith talked about cereal rye. Keith and I put cereal rye in all of our winter blends because it's going to cover you on days like this. This is right there at Branson, Missouri, or here. These deer are digging through the snow, getting a plant that was photosynthesizing, 20 hours before or 25 hours before or something like that. Look at the snow on that old doe's nose coming up there. That's some tenderloin right there. Look at that big old nanny. They look pretty fat, right? This ain't Kansas. Look in the background. That's Ozark mountain country. I wanted a blend. I wanted diversity just like God made, right? The only real monocultures I know of, plant speaking, on the planet, and I'm sure some in Africa or something I missed, but mango groves down in Florida. It's pretty much just mangoes. You canoeing through there or whatever, there's gators and snakes and druggies or whatever out there, but pretty much it's just mangoes as far as plants go. So I like a blend, and the blend does a couple things because got those tall sunflowers, but they're not catching all the sun, right? Then you go down to some milo, and that's not catching all the sun. Then you get to some buckwheat. Then you get soybeans because deer browse on them pretty hard, and you get on down. Now I got some clover down there. By the time you get down to the ground through a good blend, a well-designed blend, very little sunshine's getting to the ground. And deer, they're finicky. One of my big problems working with Western guys about whitetail is they think in terms of cattle. And if you ever look at a cow, they got a big square nose, big square muzzle. They just shovel it in. Give me some grass, I'm happy. I'll make you some meat. Give me some grass, I'll make you some meat. Give me some grass, I'll make you some meat. Elk, same way. Big old square muzzle. Buffalo. Deer got this little bitty Pinocchio nose. They're real finicky. Average tongue length of a mature deer is 11 inches long. Outside the mouth when it really gets going. They can get that blackberry that you would bleed to death if you reached in there and picked. They're very finicky eaters. So you can't just have a grass environment. And when you see deer out in a fescue field, like I'm really anti-fescue. You see deer out in the nets for deer. Get out in a fescue field, they're not eating fescue. They don't have the bacteria in their gut to digest a plant that's really high in lignin content or real thick cell walls. They're finicky eaters. But there'd be a ragweed or clover, something out there that they're eating. They're not eating the grass because they can't digest it. A little closer look, you can see all the different species in there. And Keith kind of started going down this trail, but different plants exude different carbons and different chemicals out of the root system. For example, buckwheat is really good at freeing up phosphorus. So I like some buckwheat in most of the blends. Grows real quick, attracts a lot of pollinator species. But a field of buckwheat is not what I want as a deer guy because it tops out about 14% protein. And for maximum antler growth and milk production, I need to be bumping about 16%. Wide variety of plant species, again, the native vegetation there. In our blend, summer, winter, native vegetation. I've said this every year till this year, and I shared this with Keith. I've told people for years, just dump the blends in the drill, take off. Those old stories about it separating stuff, I've never personally had it happen to me. I got a little food plot drill, it doesn't hold, 7, 8, 9, 10 pound bags of seed, and I guess it doesn't shake enough by the time I need to refill it that it doesn't serrate. But I had this client from Alabama call me. Those seeds were pretty good, Grant, but that last field I planted, this is about all brassica. I was like, what? What's wrong with that? He sent me some pictures. Sure enough, it just looked like turnip field out there. I said, man, I wonder if Keith and the boys sold him a bag of all turnips or something and didn't label it right or something. I called Keith up and we're talking about it. He had a great big giant ag drill. He's a deer guy, but some deer guys, they get real serious about it, So he had him the big old giant drill to grow him some antlers. 200 horsepower tractor. He'd planted so long that apparently it had shook enough that it did separate out. And those little hard turnip seeds, they just separated out. But I've never seen that happen. And I think if you're loading up 4, 5, 10 acres at a time, that's probably not an issue. I've just never seen it in all my years. Roots are the tillers, right? So here's a little weak soybean root up on the top corner up there. And then over there, you got the big giant root with like 1/4-inch stems coming off. That's milo. And then you got a sun hemp root there in the middle. Another reason to have diversity is some roots will go down, some will go sideways, some are great big, make great big holes for water to infiltrate real quickly, some are really small. When you disc, of course, there's a huge amount of oxygen getting in the soil. Huge amount. More than God intended. It was supposed to go down, dung beetle holes and worm holes and other things. So when you get that much oxygen, it tends to favor what we call bad or not beneficial bacteria and not favor the good bacteria. When you have just the amount that's infiltrating in, it favors the good bacteria. And again, bacteria is what drives the system. Soil needs to look like really rich chocolate cake. Just got pores and structure and rich. This is on top of those gravels I showed you literally. I had to go find the slide. That's what we've built, God built. I mean, we're just using techniques and tools and plants. And not putting any fertilizer down. Not putting very much herbicide down. Absolutely no insecticide, and I refuse to put a seed on my property that's covered with neonics. Earthworms, I love earthworms. There's exotic invasive species that do okay, but not many. Worms eat this decaying vegetation. When it's real moist, they come up to the surface, and one of my favorite things to do, by now I'm kind of crazy, is go out with my shovel in the spring when it's moist and count worms per square foot. I can't dig a foot deep in most of my fields. But when I get to 25 or more per square foot, I know life is good. I don't need to add any fertilizer. I don't need to disc. I don't need to do anything because the worms, and worms are macro or big. We can see them with our eye. But when I see that many worms, I know all the microbes are doing good too. Because if I got good habitat for worms, I got good habitat for all the little critters you can't see with your naked eye. And over here on yonder side for you, not many worms. And on the red tractor side, and I don't care what brand of tractor you use, there's a lot of worms in that habitat. So here we go. We're disking. There's NP&K throughout the soil. And, we're out here disking, feeling like we're saving the world, going to feed the world. And it fluffs up top 6, 8 inches, but you got your disc set. And then it rains, a little time goes by, and the air goes out of that because you put way too much air in there, and it sinks down, makes a hard pie crust on top. And then you plant your crops. And it hits that disc line we talked about earlier called a hard pan, and it J-roots. And you got all those tons and tons of nutrients down there below that level the plant can't get to. And it can't get to that deep moisture. When it gets a little dry on the surface, that moisture down there is just not available. It's just not available to a plant. It's there. We can stick, how you measure soil is put two electrodes about 1 meter apart in science. Why do we have to use those meter terms? Put about 1 meter apart down there and see how much electricity is traveling through, because electricity travels real easily on water, especially water and dirt, because there's ions in there. Did you know pure water won't really hardly conduct electricity? Because you have all those ions in there to conduct electricity. So that's the research you can do. I love driving by this guy spending a bunch of money on a big old pivot out there, and he's probably putting some insecticide, herbicide, fungicide, some kind of side through there. He's going to get up every day. It's a common term in soil health. We're going to kill something today. That's, I like to kill something too. 10-point, 12-inch beard. I like to kill stuff also, but I don't want to kill everything out there. And there'd be ponding or water standing on top. And I'm thinking, man, that guy spent his kids' college money on putting that pivot out there, and God gave him all the rain he needed if it just infiltrate. There's few places on the planet you have to irrigate to make a profit. You can make a bigger yield. Bigger yields don't always mean bigger profits. And you can grow antlers. I mean, you ever hunt? You probably never have, but anyone ever hunt in Mexico? There's some big whopping bucks down there. Now, you got to have a lot of bullets because you don't know who you're going to run into out there. But, I mean, there's some whoppers down there living in a desert. And we spend all this money. Erosion's a huge factor. Keith touched on it. I won't really do it. I mean, so a ton of soil across an acre is about thickness of a piece of typing paper, just a piece of paper. That's about a ton of soil. Because you read, like right now, I was losing an average statewide of 4.5 tons per acre per year, statewide. I mean, that's a lot. That's how we feed ourselves, right? Without dirt, this plant ain't looking too good. When you got a 6-inch rivulet running 100 yards across your farm, that's a lot of tons. You're just going, I got one little ditch. I didn't do too bad this year. That's a lot of dirt. Just take a gander and read that a little bit, because you will really start loving earthworms. I grow big antlers by getting my clients to grow a lot of earthworms. And if you go Stuff Mart and buy a bag of worm poop called vermiculture, I mean, that little old pint bag, I guess it's a quart bag I'm reading on there, doesn't cover much food plot. That's $14, $15, $20, depending on where you buy it and what the label shows. Or I could just have a cover crop and grow a bunch of earthworms and not worry about it. This is Dr. Dick Harley. You don't see his face, man. Brilliant guy. We were working up in New York, shooting some deer for New York Department of Environmental Conservation. They got a fancy name up there. And we was up there trying to explain why their body weights were dropping, because the deer were eating pine needles and big old chunks of wood. I mean, deer don't grow big when eating chunks of wood. But the point is, they got bacteria in their gut to kind of break it down. And that's just rumen fluid, right? I mean, I was a student at Clemson. I'm not much a football fan, but they do happen to be pretty good. We get 20 or 30 deer, and we put all the rumen content in a gallon baggie, put in a cooler, and fly it back to Clemson to the lab there with us. I always said, man, this plane wrecks, they don't think, man, they fed them people some bad food on this plane. Because it'd be pretty stinky, right? You can't freeze it. After a day or two, you got to be a wildlife biologist to kind of appreciate this stuff. And we'd sort it out by piece and then do nutritional analysis, stuff like that. And there's no reason, the deer were just starving up there. But this is what happens. There's so many microbes in their gut, and that deer there is adding microbes to the soil. A rumen, in about a teaspoon of rumen juice, you know that green stuff you see when you shoot a little bit far to the right over there, that green stuff? That's got about 1 trillion microbes per teaspoon. Trillions of microbes in a teaspoon. And when a deer or a cow or a ruminant that uses microbes to digest their food, deer do not digest food. People always ask, like Keith talks about how much rain you get. What do you feed your deer? I don't feed my deer anything. Oh, come on, why do you feed your deer? I feed microbes in deer gut. Deer ingest it. They kind of break it down a little smaller and cover it with saliva so it can get down the pipe. But the microbes do all the digesting. And the microbes die by billions, go into hindgut. That's called sloughing. And that's what deer digest. Those assimilate into proteins and stuff like that. So we feed microbes when we're growing deer. And Keith gave a brilliant seminar here. But I really encourage all of y'all to go to YouTube or the Green Cover website and watch Carbonomics. I've watched it literally like 6 times, literally. I keep adding to my notes so I'll gain some else. So yeah, get your phone out, take a picture. This is just, I mean, your PhD level soil class right here in words we can understand. I highly encourage you to watch this. So that's behind my house now. I started a bunch of cedar trees and Ceresia lespedeza. And now I have really diverse blends. That's obviously in summer, leaves on. When I got there, literally, the first year, I mentioned I have 2 transplants, and I have to keep, I'm not doing too good right now, but I'm supposed to keep my weight down because that can have a big impact on kidney health. And I'm not going to the gym. I'm just not, right? I'm not going to all those goofy people. So I walk, and when Tracy and I bought the ranch, there wasn't Onyx and hunt stand, so I had me a paper topo map, and I'd walk a ridge top. There's 7 major ridges on that ranch, and I'd go down 50 yards, and then I'd go down 50 yards, and I'd just learn the ranch. And I'm a geek, right? So I got my waterproof paper notebook and my pencil because ink will run. So I got my pencil, I'm a little science geek out there. And in the first year, I saw 1 deer. I saw a tail going around cedar trees. It's like one of the only cedar trees I don't want to kill on property. It's kind of a monument to where we started. I saw a tail in the first year. No hunting. I didn't hunt the ranch for 5 years. It was a burnout cattle ranch. I was really embarrassed of this. Now it's kind of a point of pride. I've worked literally from New Zealand to Canada, back and forth. I've never seen a property that has many cattle skeletons where the cows starved to death on it as the land I own. It was that bad. The rancher didn't care. Buy more. When we bought the ranch, I looked it up, and we're split by Stone County, kind of appropriate, and Taney County. It goes almost right through the middle of our ranch. And counties are kind of big in Missouri. Counties in Missouri were set up so a guy, and you figure about 15 miles a day on horseback. The early explorers figured about 15 miles a day on horseback. So the counties are about 30 miles by 30 miles. Now they curve at a river, whatever. They're not square, but anywhere, the rule in Missouri was to set up a county, you had to be able to get to the county seat in 1 day horseback ride, or you need another county, because everyone need to go to county seat, pay taxes later. So I got 60 miles around me, and the biggest deer registered was a 131, Pope and Young. Never Boone and Crockett. And not all deer are registered, but back in that day, when you killed a pretty big deer, you paid the $25 in the registered group. There just wasn't that many. It was a big thing. You got a little plaque on the wall. 131. We've harvested a 172. We have not harvested the biggest deer. And we commonly kill deer much larger than 131. It's not the deer. It's never genetics. Never genetics with deer. They will match the habitat. Old, worn-out Ozark soil. All the timber's been clear-cut 3 times. I have the 1951 plane, and not satellite image, aerial image from the NRCS, and all those trees you see were fescue pasture. Those were all dozed off and goated off. They called it goated off in the Ozarks. They dozed off. Of course, sprouts come back up. They turn goats on there, try to kill that, and then they spray on fescue out of a plane. So the land's been horribly abused and used. But through the process of native vegetation management and using this, we're able to grow big deer, put clean water in Taneycomo Lake where they grow big trout, and not spend very much money. I'll be around all day, talk later this afternoon. Thank you all very much for having me out here to Kansas today. Thank you very much.